we are basically here, as Prachi also has mentioned. SEED is a program which is running, among others, also this Practitioner Labs. SEED is a program which at the very end is a global accelerator which supports the transition to a green climate and inclusive economy. We are basically a multi-partner initiative which has multiple government funders and founders supporting us. And we basically have two streams where we work on. One is the kind of ecosystem work, and one is the direct enterprise support. So as a kind of accelerator working globally, we use basically our methods, approaches, not only working with enterprises, but also working with ecosystem organizations such as finances that we have here, or financial service providers, other other BDS providers and policymakers. So we use basically also this kind of approaches that we are using in our direct enterprise support to trigger new ideas, and to do this in a kind of participatory way, using basically co-creation and open innovation methods. And what's the focus of this program? It's around, at the very end, because we have worked with those eco-inclusive enterprises now since almost 20 years, bridging the missing middle gap. So we have supported more than 300 eco-inclusive enterprises, or SPOs as AVPN would call them, around the globe over the last soon almost 2 decades. And we have found, as many others of you, that this bridging this missing middle gap is a very critical piece in there. And one of the aspects that, of course, we are supporting the investment readiness of these eco-inclusive enterprises that we are supporting as part of our incubator and accelerator programs. But we also want to trigger new ideas from the supply side of finance. And I think this is why we are also kind of here today. We have already some great ideas and we want to learn more about them. So what we are doing as part of our labs, and normally these labs are a 6 or a 9-month process, is we bring different organizations together, such as today. We kind of co-create this kind of innovative solutions, and we are there to kind of really build a kind of community. And normally we do this in different countries. In the last year, we have done this in India, Thailand. In 2018, we have done this in India, Thailand, and Uganda. In 2019, we have done this in Ghana and South Africa. And in 2020, we have started with this process in Indonesia, and we'll also start with this. We'll have a second cycle in India as well. So because of it, we are also very excited to have two solutions here today from India. But having said this, this is our normal process. What we are doing here today, this is a bit coming on top. It's a teaser for this kind of practitioner labs. And how normally this kind of practitioner labs look like is that we have what we call a so-called lead-up lab, where we identify this kind of challenges. We have also in Indonesia, we had a lead-up lab, but we use basically a scoping phase to identify these challenges. Then we have a kind of kickoff. After a kickoff lab, which normally is in person, which we are now also, of course, due to the situation, do digitally, we refine those, and then we scale, we showcase those solutions in a scale-up lab and a solution rollout. So what is it that we normally look at is, I mean, we look at kind of challenges. I mean, this slide just gives you a bit of idea. We have found over the period of time, challenges are often fairly similar from the climate smart SME or financial institution perspective. The challenges are similar, perspectives are different. And over the period of time, we have developed this kind of common challenges, and have now also over the time seen quite a couple of solutions coming forward. And today is basically the situation where we look at solutions that are already in the process of being kind of developed and are moving forward. What we are often doing as part of this labs, we also support the so-called kind of product development. Today we are doing what we would call a kind of product refinement. So we will learn here about really exciting kind of solutions from two from India, one from Myanmar, one also from Indonesia, where we will learn about how do this kind of product developers are moving forward to solve this kind of missing middle challenge. And to kind of kick it off, I really would like now to hand over to our first kind of, we call them in a way challenge host, and at the same time they are also solution providers, because these are working on with the solution, they are solving a challenge. And with this kind of solution, they are of course also facing challenges. And this is, I think, the idea that of today, we will look at those kind of solutions and we'll find out actually where the challenges still in implementing this exist and how we as a group can help them to refine those solutions jointly here together. And this will be done in this 1 hour kind of breakout session. So I think let me now, hand over to Fiu Nguyen, Head of Operations from Proximity Design, to kick it off.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nin, and as Marco mentioned, I'm Head of Operation at Proximity Designs, and we're a social enterprise with a focus on rebuilding Myanmar by offering a unique platform of farm technologies, agronomy advice, and farm finance to enterprise and smallholder farmers. And in this session, I'll be presenting about the challenge that we face in agronomy advisory service provided by Proximity Designs. But before that, a bit of my background, I grew up in a former capital of Myanmar, Yangon, and I studied in the States for college. But both my paternal and maternal grandparents are farmers. My paternal grandparents grew groundnuts and pulses in the central dry zone of Myanmar, and my maternal grandparents were from the southeastern part of the country and grew paddy rice and watermelon, and I still have close relatives who are still farming. So my grandparents saw that life on a farm was tough and risky. So they worked really hard and then earned lots of money and sent my parents to capital city to let them study engineering. And then my parents then also worked really hard under the socialistic and military regime. And then they can send, they sent me to study in the States. And you can guess pretty much what happened next. I came back to Myanmar 8 years ago and then started working with farmers again. So my parents were initially very disappointed, but now they are very supportive of what I do. So when I think about farmers, I see them as entrepreneurs who supply the most important product lines in the world. And they are also employers who provide jobs to rural population, especially in a developing country like Myanmar. Farmers and laborers that the agriculture industry employ almost make up the whole population. And then if you look at the as potential solutions for current climate issues, agriculture holds the key to major problems as well. Agriculture is also one of the main source of greenhouse gas emission and the main reason for deforestation and soil erosion as well. So and so I believe that if we really want to rebuild a nation or build a sustainable future for the whole world, we really need to start working with smallholder farmers. There was some I also want to share you some key insights that I learned recently from a report published by ISF and Rural and Agriculture Finance Learning Lab. The report is called Pathways to Prosperity. So there is 170 billion global demand for smallholder finance, and more than 60% of this demand actually came from South and Southeast Asia. So when you talk about agricultural finance, there are two types too: short-term finance to get the farm up and running for the next season, and a more long-term finance for systemic changes and infrastructure development. And these long-term options are the most impactful ones, but the sad news is that the financing options for the long-term finance is also more limited. So as an agriculturalist, I believe that the sustainable agriculture is very crucial and important. And so the question is, how can we all help farmers with key investments for the long-term financing investments and make them shift to more sustainable agricultural practices? So at Proximity, one thing that differentiates us from other impact-driven social enterprises that we leverage traditional grants and uses to provide extremely affordable, innovative technology to farmers. And there are currently very few organizations that provide services to smallholder farmers in Myanmar, and they who are not, and these farms don't see farmers as an attractive customer segment. They see farming as risky. It is risky. So we have been working in Myanmar for the last 15 years, but to date, there's not a lot of organizations that work directly with farmers yet. And our goal is to build a thriving farming service ecosystem in Myanmar as well. So the way that we're trying to do so is by introducing revenue generating products that help farmers become more resilient to climate change. So we do so by one, demonstrating the commercial viability of small farm services and attract private sector. And then at the same time, these services have to provide farmers with the tools and knowledge so that they can mitigate the impact of climate change. And then also we ask for, we charge farmers for that so that our organization is also sustainable itself. So a bit of the agronomy, farm agronomy service background. We started, Proximity was founded in 2004, and we started out with irrigation technology products, and then over time we have been adding new businesses such as farm finance, and then the last business that we added was farm advisory. So we added in 2014, and then in 2018 we started also adding this freemium model with soil testing service. So the way that we do is that we provide general like agronomy advice such as seed quality, nutrient management, crop protection, integrated pest management on a free basis. But then if the farmers wants to know more tailored advice on their how to provide soil nutrient to their soil, how to do better fertilizer management practices, then we provide a pay for soil testing service, and then we provide them the tailored advice based on the crops that they want to grow and based on the soil type that they have. So this type of soil testing service is it's widely available in many developed countries, but in Myanmar we are also first of its kind. So currently we are like this is an unmet demand. We don't have any competitions at all. The basic science kits, we have those in the market, but they are too simple and they don't provide accurate results. And then the government labs, there are also government labs who provide the soil testing service, but we only have one in the whole country. And it's really inaccessible for farmers, and they are really expensive. And the test results also give just the analysis and not translating back to the actions that the farmers have to do. We also have some fertilizer companies who provide more advanced technology, but then farmers also lack trust with fertilizer companies because they see them as trying to do more marketing and pushing them to buy fertilizers, chemicals without having the interest in the farmers. So as a nonprofit, we really want to be a market maker and invite competitors and other players. So there's a huge, enormous demand, and one organization cannot take it, right? So we have over 25 million smallholder farmers in Myanmar, and the most reach that we could do annually is up to 100,000. So that's the current maximum capacity that we're having. So even with the like the big market sector is one challenge, but then there's also other bottlenecks and challenges as well for in the providing the test survey itself. So for example, soil collection is really time consuming. It must be systematically collected. So currently our staff are doing the soil collection for the farmers, so which drive up a lot of the human resources costs. The soil needs to be dry before it could be tested. So it ended up taking time, and then the place to store the soil and to dry it. And then the less important thing is that even after the testing, the nutrient recommendation has to be shared back in person, because it takes one-on-one explanations for the farmers to actually understand the result and to stick, right? So the farmers can actually apply what they learn from the analysis and get to actually implement in the farm. So we've been looking into other opportunities, solutions to solve these challenges, especially with the private sector, trying to have more private sector's involvement. So one option that we are currently thinking is to leverage a network of agents, village level agents, retailers, if they could help with the soil collection, or we are trying to do more with trying to partner more with licensing with more advanced testing technology, but it has a lot of effort costs, and that we will still face the bottleneck of swab collection. We were trying to see if we could leverage the dealer inputs store as well. And then we're looking into other co-financing activities. So if you look at in India, soil testing is seen as a public good through the government testing and large philanthropy organization like Gates Foundations. Myanmar is not an option. And then we are still currently looking for what type of other private sector opportunities that we can access. So the future plan is we really want to scale this up, but there's a lot of challenges that we need to solve, and we're hoping that we will have some solutions from discussions at this panel today.
Super. Thanks so much, Fio. So this was a very exciting insight. We will basically look at this solution overview and this kind of blueprint, as we call it, in detail in this 1 hour session. I would like to hand over with much further ado and without kind of questions, because again, it will be discussed in detail. Moving now to our second solution out of 4, handing over to Santosh Kumar Singh, Associate Partner at IntelliCap, and get some insights from him on those on the solution that they are working on currently. Please, Santosh. I think you're on mute. If you're speaking, you're on the call, Santosh.
Sorry. That's a typical problem that we face. Sorry. So thanks AVPN and Suite for taking this cause of missing middle, for MSME. Let me just quickly introduce myself and then I take you through the solution. My name is Santosh and I lead the energy and climate change practice at IntelliCap, which is an Aviskar group company. IntelliCap is the advisory arm of the Aviskar group, which works to build businesses that can benefit the underserved segments across Asia and Africa. IntelliCap focuses on building enabling ecosystems and channeling capital to entrepreneurs who are building sustainable and equitable society. So we do deal facilitations, and the group companies also invest into debt and equity. Personally, I have been working in the energy and climate change space for more than 15 years. In my previous role, I worked with the World Bank, GIJ, Tata Trust, primarily focusing on how enterprises and market-led solutions can be scaled up. So coming back to the solution, I think, at the outset, and before I talk about the solution, let me just summarize my experience of working with a number of MSME who were seeking or who are seeking, climate finance. Climate finance for them is like a mythical creature. It exists, but most of them have not seen it. So they turn up and saying, hey, I know that there's a climate finance that I can get, but I don't know how to get it. So that summarizes the problem of, MSMEs who are looking for climate finance. So, and that was the kind of primary motivation with which we wanted to kind of develop this solution. And, our single line theory of change was that how we can make climate finance available to MSMEs. That's the one line. And then we are, started looking at that. And we realized that the financing ecosystem, it is not very amenable to MSME because of its structural and legacy challenges. The most commonly cited challenges are A, of the ticket size, B, of the convoluted process of getting climate finance, and last but not the least, lack of knowledge among the MSMEs about the climate finance options. So with these challenges on thought, we thought that it will take hell amount of time to change the system. So we thought of a solution that can be plugged into the existing system and make the climate finance flow to the MSME. So, if you can see my screen, see the screen of, that Prachi has shared. The solutions are very, very simple, but the financial mechanism gets a bit complicated. So I would like to kind of highlight that while the core principle of our solution is that pull the demand of capital or already deployed capital at higher cost from non-climate finance sources, and then put it into a structure that can get the climate finance of the required ticket size, and pass it on to the MSMEs. So that's the first solution that we're talking about. And you can see the structure we are talking about here. Uh, it's a very simplified version of the product or the intervention we are talking about. But basically, it pulls a number of SMEs who are eligible for climate finance, but they are looking at a very, very smaller ticket size that is not amenable for the climate finance. We put into a structure and then bring the climate finance of a required ticket size to pass it on. So that's the first intervention. The second one we are doing is that to provide a very guided and kind of hand-holding support to MSMEs to make them eligible for climate finance. A number of MSMEs are not kind of understanding the requirements which are there for availing the climate finance. So the focus is that how we can make those MSME understand the climate finance and make their structures, make their operations such that they can avail climate finance. So these are the two, and I'm happy to discuss that later, but these are the two solutions that we're talking about. We work with a number of MSME, help them kind of be in the right structure so that they can be eligible for climate finance. And then if they are not kind of looking for the ticket size that is amenable, we get them into a structure through which we can deliver the climate finance. So the key stakeholders here are typically the MSME investors and financial intermediaries. We work as a financial intermediary, and we try to kind of make the whole thing happen and then bring the investors and pass on the capital to MSME. And considering that our focus is to make the affordable and easily accessible climate finance available, we are looking at all the sources where we can reduce the cost of capital and pass the benefit to the MSME. So large institutional investors like OPIC, Proparco, FMO, and anyone who is kind of interested in climate finance is looking at these markets is the stakeholder that we are working with. And I would not go into the kind of what sets it apart. I think anybody who is operating in MSME space, they would tell you that they have tried availing climate finance and they have given up after spending a year or so and saying that this is not worth the effort, and they have gone back to a provider who gives them the traditional source of capital but at a higher rate. So the basic principle that we are talking about sets this apart. It makes it easier for the MSMEs to avail it, and it makes it easier for investors to push the climate finance to MSME. So that's the two kind of things that we look at. In terms of impact potential, I think Prachi, I can just handle the thing now. Let me see. Okay, yeah. So on climate impact, I think I'm not summarizing it in terms of how many tons of carbon and how many kind of people can be impacted, because we are talking about a structure, and that would depend on the kind of enterprises we support. But considering the structure is primarily for those entities who are contributing to climate solutions, so that can be quantified once we have the the pipeline and the result from those investment. Economic impact is surely the overarching economic impact that we see is that how we can make the MSME more viable. MSMEs struggle with the high cost of capital and kind of wasted efforts to reach for those climate finance sources unsuccessfully. So our focus is that this will increase the viability and sustainability of the MSMEs and kind of reduce their cost of capital and make them more viable. Key partner and resources, but IntelliCap would be doing the whole intermediary role and working with NBFCs and MSMEs to make the pipeline, to make the structure, etc. And then we are working with institutions like the climate bond initiatives and other to make sure that the assets are properly certified and they are amenable for availing climate finance. Co-financing, I think at this point of time, we are too early to kind of disclose the names, but we are finalizing a few partnerships that would be kind of available. Taking back to the target market, right now we are focused in India, and clean energy and agriculture are the two sectors that we are actively pursuing. But since IntelliCap and Aviskar Group has a wider footprint in Asia and Africa, We hope that these structures would be kind of translated into Southeast Asia and other Asian countries, as well as to East Africa market that we cater to. And initial kind of target market palette, we are looking at 20 to 50 million USD tickets, kind of pool. And the ticket size would be something in the range of less than $1 million. So 500,000 to, that number. In terms
Perfect.
of risk management in the solution, I've not gone into the kind of, the details of each measures, but there are two key principles that we are working on. The framework for pulling up the asset basically looks at the quality of assets and try to club them into different kind of investment grades, so that this is easily clear to investors. So in case of the assets which are not investment grade, we try to do investment grade enhancements to make this work. And the second feature that we are building in that we want to bring the first loss default guarantee and other, so that the investor get a bit of comfort in the case of default, and we also kind of make the system a bit robust. In the terms of where we stand right now, I think we are now looking at pulling the assets and kind of working with the pipeline. So we hope to close a few transactions in next 4 to 5 months. And then I think mechanism wise, I just told you that all these things are there. We are right now looking for partners and looking for building the pipeline, and then we go for the transactions in next 4 to 5 months. I think I'll stop here and discuss this later whenever the discussion happens.
Super. Thank you so much, Santosh. This was very insightful. Also, indeed, kind of a different perspective from India, different ticket size, broader also from a sector perspective. Happy to hand over, we stay in India, to Vikash Shah, Senior Manager Investments from Wilgrow, from the Wilgrow Innovations Foundation. So yeah, please take it from there, Vikash.
Thanks, Mirko. Good morning, everyone. I think I'll just give a small brief about myself and also about Wilgrow. So I have been in the development sector for the past 7 years now. I've worked across education, employability, and in terms of working on different kind of financing products to help early stage innovative enterprises who are trying to tackle these social challenges. Wilgrow itself is an early stage social enterprise incubator in India for the past 20 years. We have worked with more than 300 odd social enterprises across different stages. We work in sectors which are agri, education, climate change, and health tech. So those are the 4 sectors that we are working in, and we continuously strive to expand into other sectors as well. So that's the brief about Wilgrow. I think talking about climate financing, taking a cue from our previous speaker, Santosh, he talked about how there is a mirage about climate finance and MSMEs are not able to access it. I think our solution in some ways is linked with theirs, but probably comes a step before them. So we identified this problem saying that most of these enterprises are probably not debt ready, right? So one aspect is they do not know how to access debt. That is kind of an information arbitrage problem. But on the other hand, you also have companies who are not yet credit worthy or do not have that kind of a financial transaction or financial history on which lending can happen. So identifying this particular gap, we realized that one of our companies called Cool Crop, which my colleague Gautam will talk about, and when I hand it over to him, we realized that a lot of companies are not able to deploy solutions, and hence the climate as well as the economic impact gets delayed because of this lack of credit history. So hence we thought of this design, if you look at the solution, where we kind of try to build the credit history for early stage enterprises by providing, again, the FLDG structure that briefly Santosh mentioned about. So you look at a partner where we have a donor. The donor provides a grant to Wilgrow Innovation Foundation. Wilgrow Innovation Foundation uses that money to partner with an NBFC, and we have Caspian, Sushant from Caspian here, who will talk about the role of the NBFC as well. So so the financial institution gets a guarantee, and then collectively Wilgrow and the financial institution work with the enterprises to give them their first set of, let's say, loan, which is kind of not necessarily a very high ticket size loan, but kind of seeding it with let's say 5 million INR kind of a ticket size, right? And based on that seeding, we try to also refine their pricing mechanism, kind of the revenue models for them to be able to successfully repay this debt. So this cycle is repeated a couple of times, and once the lender has full confidence that the enterprise has found a successful business model, has strong credit history, and has the faith to lend to the enterprise directly, then we take away that guarantee ideally after 2 cycles of lending to be done. We take away that credit, that first loss guarantee, and then move on to the next set of enterprises. So that's the idea, and we hope that once this is done for, let's say, 30, 40 or 100 odd enterprises, they can then maybe move on to Santosh's idea, and they can take up ticket sizes of, let's say, up to 500,000 USD to $1 million USD. So I think that's how we are connected with the previous solution, and that's what our idea has been. In terms of the specific example, I think which will help all of you understand how it's going to work, I'll hand over to my colleague Gautam, who will talk about the company CoolCrop.
Yeah, thank you, Akash. So just to give a little bit of context about the scenario, energy scenario in India. So because of the push from the current government, electricity has reached almost all corners of India. But what the problem is that the electricity is not stable and it's intermittent, right? There are some villages which still report close to 8 hours of power cut, or some even more. And so and also we have seen that quite a few enterprises of the previous generation, which are lighting or solar home systems, they have sort of saturated the market. Now they're at some scale. What is suffering because of this intermittent power are rural enterprises, right? Just non-agri based enterprises. I think in 2017 we had more than 30 million in non-agri, and agri even I think twice that number. So there is a huge market, and renewable energy enterprises, especially in times of corona and in times of huge natural disasters like cyclones, decentralized livelihood supporting enterprises, supporting energy appliances are the way to go in our opinion. And based on that, Will Grow itself has collaborated with a policy think tank called CEW to launch the program called Powering Livelihoods, where we are supporting these sort of enterprises. Just to take one example of a potential enterprise is CoolCrop, right? Which is a farm gate cold storage, which can go from anywhere from 4 metric tons to up to 15 metric tons. The scenario on the ground is that whenever the farmer produces especially high value products like flowers or fruits and vegetables, they are forced to sell to intermediaries just because of their of lack of cold storage solutions, and that's where I think a solution like CoolCrop would help. Currently it's around 25 of these have been installed currently, but there is a limit to the scaling potential, especially because the target market, which is the farmers or the FPOs and self-help groups, they don't have a credit history, so to speak, and so that's where they hit a ceiling. So many of these organizations have now moved on to a model where they are looking at taking the risk on their books and supporting the last mile through debt that they get, right? So the model that CoolCrop currently follows is a leasing model where they provide the cold storage to the FPO for a monthly payment of around 17,000, 18,000 INR, and so that makes it a lot more accessible, and impact in turn impacts the farmer's livelihood as well. Now, the source of funding for these are typically grants and debt, which they pay some collateral, typically from their own funds. So that's where they hit a ceiling, and hence we saw that there is this big challenge which can be addressed by a solution like what Vikash just described. Yeah, so that's a sort of a live example that we see where an FLDG product can be really helpful.
Perfect, great. So I think what we have seen here, and again, I would like to leave it at that in terms of interest of time, that these are the nice solutions that we have seen also fairly often are nicely kind of complementary, because even when we talk kind of missing middle, indeed, like there are different definitions of missing middle, like, I mean, some starting more at the smaller kind of ticket sizes, where others are looking then at kind of larger ticket sizes. And especially, yeah, as you have described, both of you, like challenges are very different across those lines in terms of talking investment readiness. Great. So I would now like to hand over to Neha. Now we are moving to an exciting topic of blockchain bonds. So Neha Junea is advisor at Climate Future Action. So please take it away.
Marco. Hello, everyone. My name is Neha, and I work. I'm presently an advisor to Climate Future Action Foundation, a Netherlands-based foundation which is aiming to build a sort of a non-speculative cryptocurrency for investments in climate change action. Prior to this, and I've co-founded a startup that has gone on to become the region's biggest clean cook stoves enterprise. And prior to that, I've worked in the financial derivative space. The idea that the challenge that we're presenting here today is essentially a way to make investments in the generation of carbon offsets frictionless as we possibly can with the least transaction costs. To give a little bit of perspective, all of us have heard about carbon credits and climate finance via carbon credits or carbon offsets. And just to give an overview, the carbon offsets industry is worth $45 billion every year. And it sees a good amount of participation from forestry enterprises, from SMEs, and even from community-based organizations whose activities are leading to avoidance of carbon emissions. To give you a little bit of perspective on blockchain-based financial instruments, pretty much every cryptocurrency is based on blockchain. And while we're not talking about speculative cryptocurrencies, globally about $250 billion is transacted or held in assets over blockchain, which kind of has gone on to prove that it's a secure transaction instrument and it's a clever way to build financial products on. So with that background, the idea is that how do we channel money from a variety of investors and stakeholders and even carbon offset buyers into SMEs who are intending to either shift to cleaner technologies or low carbon technologies themselves, let's say changing their energy source from diesel to solar, or perhaps executing the deployment of climate-friendly technologies for their consumers, which would be electric vehicles, cleaner cooking, efficient lighting, so on and so forth. So what we see is that on one hand, I have not come to the challenge yet, but on one hand, you have a whole range of carbon offset buyers, which include industries, corporates, even individuals, and of course, a lot of consumer brands who buy carbon offsets out of voluntary or industry standard reasons. And on the other hand, you have a whole range of SMEs who have climate-friendly technologies, but there's either a trust gap or there is, as we've already established, a problem of linking the two. So, and to also add to this, the whole process via which carbon offsets are generated, evaluated, calculated, and audited is very well defined under the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. So what is the meaning of an offset? How do you generate it with, say, a solar product or an electric vehicle or waste processing is very well established, documented. There are audit processes, and it's been around for quite some time. However, in spite of this, the biggest challenge for SMEs to access this market, even though they might be selling solar or doing waste processing or electric vehicles, is the fact that in order to generate a carbon offset, you first need to deploy a technology, then you need to wait about 12 months or so before the offset quantifies in a certain value and then sell it. So the problem remains the problem of upfront forward finance. So I make solar products, I sell them to, let's say, 50,000 consumers in an year, but the credits come 1 year later. So I sell 50,000. However, if somebody uh, prepaid me the price of those credits, maybe $10,000 or so, I can possibly potentially use that money and sell 80,000 units instead of my 50,000 units. And hence there's more impact on the market. There's more revenue for the SME. And of course, there's more climate action by itself. So how do you bridge this gap between a buyer, a seller of carbon offsets, and provide this forward financing? So our idea, or the broad idea, is to build a bond-like instrument over blockchain. Blockchain because blockchain is something that cannot be tampered, it cannot be tweaked, and you can build a lot of programmatic transaction milestones into a blockchain. For example, as a seller of electric vehicles, somebody can buy a blockchain bond and invest in my electric vehicle company. Every time I sell an electric vehicle, it is likely to generate, let's say, 2 carbon offsets in a year. Now, the bond allows the buyer to have rights over these 2 carbon offsets, to either the revenue from the sale of those offsets or just onboard the offsets themselves. And I get paid for, I get money from this bond. Money gets released from this bond to me once I submit some kind of evidence, again, electronically, that an electric vehicle has been sold. So it's all milestone triggered, which blockchain allows us to do very well. And also blockchain allows us to make these transactions or do these transactions at the least cost, which the financial services industry has seen till date. Again, not going the Bitcoin and the crypto way, but just regular blockchain. So the things that we want to build with this bond over blockchain, maybe bond is not the right term, but bond over blockchain is to, of course, enable upfront financing in which there is some security where the investor knows exactly where their money is going. It also helps overcome the problem of investors having to do due diligence on an SME as opposed to the climate action project. For example, I run an SME selling solar, and the climate action investor is interested in the climate change impact, but they're not really interested in how I manufacture or what my overheads and other things the organization by itself is. They're interested in how many solar home systems I push out, how many offsets they generate. And this kind of an instrument lets you invest only in how many offsets I generate and how many systems I push out as a consequence. And the investor does not really have to bother very much about what the organizational makeup is and other things are. So this is one problem that we solve. The other is, of course, ticket size. You can have low transaction costs on blockchain, which can allow you to have bond sizes of $100 or $500 of much more as well, which is, and of course, such bonds, if since it's an electronic bond, a bond over blockchain is called a token. Since it's an electronic token, it can be traded in a peer-to-peer way. I can always sell my token to a third party or a friend or whoever, and or an institution, and I can also go ahead and list it on exchanges. There are quite a few exchanges that exist that trade roughly about $40 billion annually in assets and tokens, which are non-speculative blockchain-based contracts. And so we solved the problem of course, we haven't solved the problem, but we're aiming to solve the problem of providing forward finance for carbon offset generation, especially for SMEs and community-based organizations. We are aiming to solve the ticket size problem. You invest less, you invest more, it depends. You make the investment modular, because a lot of climate action activities are also modular. As an organization, I may have capacity to only sell 10,000 electric scooters in a year, for example. So I need money only for 10,000. Maybe a $7 million bond does not make sense for me. I need $20 a scooter or $200 a scooter. And the third problem is that we're aiming to solve is that of liquidity. That how do you create an asset? And if an asset is liquid, there is bound to be more investor interest in it as opposed to in illiquid assets, which are typically investments in company, like debt in a company. From our understanding, is more illiquid than, let's say, a bond that does that takes carbon offsets, which is common to many kinds of enterprises and climate action activities, as opposed to singular SMEs by themselves. I will stop there. I don't know how long it took. I will stop there.
Super. Super. Thanks so much, Nia. So I think this was a nice kind of also different perspective, not only from the technology level, but also looking in particular at the proceeds and the outcomes of those companies and how they can be financed. So I think now this were basically our kind of small kind of pitches, which we're introducing in a way now also our group work. My colleague Maggie would now kind of start to split us into 4 groups. So you are kind of pre-assigned. So you will now get to know also my seat colleagues working with us here, who will moderate jointly with this Solution Presenters Challenge host the different sessions. So you will have basically Katrin Kirsch, who will be with the IntelliCap group. With Will Grow, we will have Maggie and my colleague Ned with proximity design. So we will, now have about 50 minutes time to look at those solutions in particular. And we will basically go back to this solution overview, and you will get to know now Mural as well. This is a tool that we are using to capture some of those insights, which make it a bit more kind of also collaboratively mimicking a real workshop where we would have a kind of pinboard or a flip chart where we can kind of scribble a bit around. Hopefully you will now also enjoy this kind of coming 50 minutes. We are about 60 people, so we have 15 to 17 participants in each group. Please, Maggie will now assign you to the different groups. You need to click, there needs to be sometimes an accept. You will see accept when you are, you need to click accept once you are assigned. And then, you will have the chance in a smaller group now to have really a discussion around these different solutions that we have heard of.